We are now going to present Moment's Robert S. Greenberger Journalism Award. Robert is a dear friend and a journalist I've respected for many years. He wrote several stories for Moment, and in 2010, he helped Nadine establish the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative to encourage young writers to report on anti-Semitism and other deeply rooted prejudices. As a member of the advisory board, I can tell you that it's a very important project. Our journalists report on stories that don't receive enough attention, such as the Dominican Republic efforts to take citizenship away from the thousands of Haitians who were born there, and the camps in Myanmar where the Rohingya Muslims are imprisoned. We were way ahead of the curve on that story. Today, our current fellow is in Iraq, writing about the deteriorating conditions for the country's religious minorities. I know that Robert and his family are proud that this project will be part of his legacy. This is the third year we've had the privilege of presenting this award in Robert's honor, and I'm going to ask his son, Scott, to come up here and to tell you a little bit about it. Scott.
Thank you, Robert. My mother tells a story of how my dad, who at the time was working in the family business, which was a paper business, somewhat ironically, saw his friend Peter Osnos on television being interviewed by William F. Buckley. In that moment, he decided that he wanted to be a journalist. After going back to school in his 30s, he became a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and over the years became known for his rigorous coverage of labor, economics, foreign affairs, and the Supreme Court. Moment established the Robert S. Greenberger Award 2 years ago to recognize journalists who pursue the truth and are undaunted in their efforts to tell the stories that need to be told. Our first recipient was Jake Tapper in 2017. Last year, we presented the award to Jane Mayer, and this year we are presenting it to Evan Osnos, who writes for The New Yorker. We are delighted to have Tom Friedman with us tonight. He and my father worked together during the years they both traveled with 4 secretaries of state.
It's a treat to be here this evening, and especially to be able to honor my friend Evan Osnos, who really came into all our households and made his fame covering China. And in keeping with the spirit of the evening, Evan, that was a country of 1.3 billion people, and I'm going to name every one of them. Not really. It is a treat and honor to be here tonight to sing the praises of 2 of my favorite reporters, Bob Greenberger and Evan Osnos. I use the word reporter deliberately. For me, it is an honorific, the highest honorific I could bestow on either of them. Never have we needed more great reporters like Bob and Evan, people who go out with a notebook, hit the pavement, and seek the truth unto its innermost parts without fear or favor. We have more than enough tweeters, commentators, Instagrammers, but we do not have enough reporters, people who do the grunt work to show us all the inconvenient truths around us every day. And we've never needed more of them than now, because never has our democracy and our free press been more under assault by our very own president and his enablers. Never have the twin pillars of democracy, truth and trust, been more under assault by our very own president and his enablers, and some are in the media. Nothing can hurt us more as a country. Without shared truth, we cannot get anything big done as a country. Without mutual trust, we cannot get anything big done as a country. Without courageous reporters, we cannot draw attention to the nonstop violations of both truth and trust going on today. While this is a dark hour for our country, it is the highest hour for our profession. Courageous, deep, thorough, memorable, breaking reporting is being done every day now by reporters at the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the New Yorker, NPR, especially NPR, especially All Things Considered Weekend Edition, and many, many more, as well as all our major networks, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, all except for one. I first met Bob Greenberger when I was the New York Times bureau chief in Jerusalem. Bob was on a reporting trip from the Wall Street Journal and looked me up. We hit it off immediately, the same sense of humor, the same strong connection to Israel and the Jewish community, the same devotion to family. A few years later, we found ourselves traveling the world together, as you saw, as part of the merry band of 12 reporters, accompanying Secretary of State James A. Baker during his 4 remarkable years and 750,000 miles as Secretary of State. It was with Bob Greenberger and Margaret Warner that I did one of the most dangerous things I've ever done in my journalistic career. I still don't know what I was thinking. But we were in Kinshasa, Zaire, on a trip with Baker, and we were staying at the Kinshasa Hilton. And there was only one restaurant open that night. It was an Indian restaurant. That's right, I ate curry in Kinshasa with Bob Greenberger and Margaret Warner. The most dangerous thing I have ever done. But we all lived to tell the tale. Bob and I had a routine whenever we went to Saudi Arabia in the early 90s when Riyadh was still supporting an austere Islamic fundamentalism and some of its jihadist offshoots. We would stay in the official Saudi government guest house where they never gave you a bill. There wasn't even a cash register. So Bob and I always saved up all our dry cleaning for the stop at Riyadh. We figured it would mean they would have less money to support religious extremists. We thought of it as supporting Saudi reform, one dry clean t-shirt at a time. On a trip to Uzbekistan with Secretary Baker, there were not enough hotel rooms. It was on that trip that picture was taken, and Bob and I were assigned to be roommates. We stayed up half the night laughing, composing funny emails to our wives. I miss Bob. I miss his good humor, his decency, his curiosity, his love of country, his attachment to the Jewish community, and most of all, I miss his reporting. The good Lord blessed Bob with many things, most notably his amazing wife and 3 wonderful sons whom he adored. But the good Lord took Bob's reporter's notebook away and his typewriter away way too soon. Fortunately, though, we have a new generation of Bob Greenbergers, epitomized by my friend Evan Osnos. Evan's book, Age of Ambition, Chasing Fortune, Truth, and Faith in the New China, won the 2014 National Book Award for Nonfiction, and it is a classic that has stood the test of time. Just watch what's playing out in Hong Kong today. Read Evan's book, and you'll see how right he's been. Whatever, it was a terrific book, and drew on his years of reporting for The New Yorker and highlighting the ongoing struggle inside China between an increasingly powerful state and population increasingly chafing for more freedom to think, travel, write, and innovate. Since returning from China in 2013, Evan has been a foreign correspondent in America, bringing his great reporting eye to big political and social trends unfolding here. I always look for his byline because I know I'm going to find under it great reporting, great storytelling, and great analysis. Whether it is taking on Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg before it was fashionable, or taking us inside Joe Biden's preparation for running for president. I've often been approached by young people who say, I'd like to be a journalist. I'd like to do what you do. What do I need? And I say, well, there's a couple things you need. You need to be able to type really fast. I can type really fast. I went to Knight Secretarial School in London to learn how to type, as Ann will tell you. But it's actually 2 things I think you need to be the kind of reporter that Evan Osnos and Bob Greenberger have been. The first is you have to like people. You have to enjoy hearing the crazy things they say, do, fear, believe, aspire. And if you can't hear the music, you'll never be able to play the music. And Bob and Evan both share that. They really like people. And because people like them, they open up to them and share the very things that make for great reporting and storytelling. The second thing you need, though, is actually you have to be a good listener. And it's for two reasons. And the second reason is actually more important than the first. The first is what you learn when you listen. Bob and Evan are great listeners. But much more important is what you say when you listen. Listening is a sign of respect. And it is amazing, a sign of respect. And it is amazing what people will allow you to ask them and say to them if they think you respect them. And Bob and Evan are great journalists because they like people and they're good listeners. So it's with great pleasure for me to give a shout out to them, Bob and Evan. They honor these Moment Journalism Awards, and they are deservedly honored by them.
I have a lot of reasons to be grateful this evening, beginning with the most immediate fact, and that is the sublime pleasure of being introduced by my friend, the journalism superhero, Tom Friedman. Yes. I have to say Tom has this ability, as several million people know, to name the very experience that we are going through as a people, as a historical moment, before we have found the words to be able to do it. And there is a particular feeling as a reporter when you see Tom has come to the place that you're reporting on, and it's a combination of awe and dread, because you know he will get it before you have a chance to do it. So, to Tom, thank you for that. I have to tell you, though, I can beat your curry and Kinshasa story because I've had sushi in Damascus. I am enormously grateful to Moment Magazine for allowing me into this very flattering company this evening, the other honorees, Nina and Phyllis and Aviva. As a fan, as a viewer, as a listener, it is a thrill to be here with you in the Moment community, which plays such a vital role, as all of us in this room know, in Jewish thought and life, without, I dare say, losing a sense of humor about it, which is important for those of us at The New Yorker. I think there may be a bit of overlap in some of our readership. I'm going to go out on a limb with that. But at The New Yorker, we are at peace with the idea that people open the magazine first to read the cartoons. And you know you do it. And then we hope, if we're doing our jobs right, that you'll stay and read 7,000 words on the most important new poet in Minsk. Very important work being done in Minsk. In the spirit, in Moment, you read, there is a spirit of moral attention that reminds me of an expression that was favored by my great-grandfather, Zygmunt Bohovsky. He was a neurologist who also wrote articles for Jewish newspapers during the Russo-Japanese War of 1904. So if you wonder if this is genetic, it is. And on his tombstone in Warsaw, it says, "I am a Jew, nothing human is strange to me." And of course, it is a terrific pleasure to be receiving, it's an honor to be receiving an award in honor of Robert Greenberger, whose reporting and humor and intelligence and warmth have endeared him to so many and have earned him so many admirers, including in my family. It is through some divine combination of fate and nepotism that I stand here today, I'm pleased to say. As some of you know, Bob and my father were in the same dorm at Brandeis. They backpacked across Europe together on $5 a day. As my father reminded me, that's when $5 could actually do quite well for you in Europe. And later, Bob liked to say that he chose journalism after taking a look at how much fun my father was having in this business and realizing that it was a profession he wanted as well. To Phyllis and to the Greenberger sons, Scott and Peter and Eric, thank you for extending your friendship to a second generation of Osnoses. Many members of my family are here tonight. My wife, Sarah Beth, right there, without whom none of this would be possible. Anything that goes on in our house is thanks to Sarah Beth. Her parents, Ruth Nemzoff and Harris Berman, who came from Boston. My parents, Susan and Peter Osnos, who came from New York. My mother, Susan, as some of you know, has been an advocate for human rights, and especially for vulnerable people caught in the web of wartime ever since she moved herself to Vietnam at the age of 23 during the war. She raised my sister Catherine and me to believe that we have a responsibility to care and protect people whose names we might never know, and it's a commitment that we hope to pass on to my own kids, Ollie and Rose. And it was also in Saigon that my mother met my father, who was a foreign correspondent, and the rest, lucky for me, was history. We're here tonight to recognize what our hosts have rightly called journalism in tumultuous times. And in that spirit, I'd like to say a few words about my dad and the path that carried him to today. His parents, Joseph and Marta Osnos, and his brother Robert, escaped Warsaw after Hitler invaded in 1939. They traveled through Romania, Turkey, Iraq, and eventually landed in India, which was under British control. And that's where my father was born in 1943 in Mumbai. To this day, on his birth certificate, it reads caste Polish. India was relatively safe, but they took nothing for granted. At the local school, my Uncle Robert had to pass as an Orthodox Christian. Eventually, the family set sail across the Pacific. They arrived in San Pedro, California on February 4th, 1944. And later, my Uncle Robert I asked him what mattered most to him about that day of arrival. And he said that it meant that he would never have to pretend to be someone he was not. And 75 years later, and counting, he has not. My father entered journalism as an assistant to the great investigative reporter I.F. Stone on his weekly newsletter. Then my father cheers to I.F. Stone. My father then spent 18 years at the Washington Post, including as a correspondent in Moscow, where the state press accused him of being a CIA handler for Anatoly Sharansky, now Natan Sharansky. It's probably worth mentioning my father was not a CIA handler, though I sort of wish he was, because it would make a hell of a story. He later joined Random House as an editor and a publisher, and in 1997 he founded a publishing house of his own called Public Affairs Books, dedicated to what he called the standards and values and flair of three mentors: I.F. Stone, Ben Bradley, and Robert Bernstein, who led Random House and founded Human Rights Watch. And today those three mentors are gone, but their tradition lives on in the work of Public Affairs. The independence of I.F. Stone, the tenacity of Ben Bradley, and the dignity of political dissent that Bob Bernstein fought so hard to protect. And it's hard to think of a time when those values have felt more vital than they are today in Washington, or for that matter, in China, where I've spent so much of my life. In so many places today, we see the pressures to compromise, to trim our criticisms, to censor our words for the sake of getting in the room or staying in office. At first glance, it can sound sophisticated to hold your fire strategically. It can sound naive to say or write what you really think. But those of us who are fortunate to work in the world of a free press have a responsibility to use it. And those of us whose families were fortunate enough to be welcomed into this country and protected by it can use our voices to tell the stories of those who do not, to this day, enjoy that protection. In my case, I've been lucky many times over. Lucky to be the descendant of iron-willed refugees Joseph and Marta, who embraced this country and were embraced by it. Lucky to bear the middle name Richard after my late cousin Jan Richard, one of many who did not make it out of the war. And lucky to be the inheritor of the values and standards, if not quite yet the flair of my father and all that he stands for. Thank you for the privilege to be here, and thank you for listening.